from Rixie. This is Debuff, and I'm your host, Steve Skeels. Today, I'll be talking about the first Outriders Broadcast, next-gen backwards compatibility, and Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Remastered. The first Outriders Broadcast had some new gameplay footage, which showcased some new features and more details on the Trickster class. In case you've missed it, Outriders is an upcoming third-person shooter RPG developed by People Can Fly and published by Square Enix. The game is launching this holiday on PC, PlayStation 4 and 5, and Xbox One and Series X. Before I get into the gameplay, there are two features they showed that I want to touch on first. The first was custom UI. You can turn off any part of the HUD you don't want, which I think is great because you may want to turn off things like your current XP in order to get a cleaner screen. Then they talked about the world tiers, which are the difficulty levels akin to Torment in Diablo 3 or Mayhem in Borderlands 3. These will allow you to increase the difficulty in exchange for better rewards. You can manually change it, but apparently the game will attempt to dynamically adjust depending on how well you are playing. There were some other things they mentioned, like how all the lore will be in-game, you won't have to look it up online like what Destiny did early on, and of course there will be no microtransactions, and this is not a game as a service. Now for the gameplay they showed. It started off by showcasing the Pyromancer class going through an early mission and highlighting the monster enemies that we'll be facing. There are some larger enemies that will be more challenging, but of course there are also smaller ones that group together in packs, and they look pretty vicious. All the enemies seem to be pretty aggressive and require the player to act quickly, though they did seem to rip through the segment pretty easily, but later they said that this was on a low difficulty. The segment also showed off some of the Pyromancer's powers, but it didn't really detail them. After that, they moved on and showed 4 out of 8 of the Trickster powers and their skill tree. The Trickster class will play at close range and center around getting in and out of combat for quick damage, though they said you can build it like a tank. They heal when attacking at close range, so it'll definitely suit aggressive play. The first Trickster power showed off was Temporal Slice, one of the main powers that lets you sweep attack a group of enemies, slowing them and causing them to explode if at low enough health. The second was Borrowed Time, which provides a shield and sets a time clone. When you use it again, you will teleport back to the clone, getting you out of encounters easily. Third is Slow Trap, a bubble that slows enemies to give you the edge on a group. And last is Hunt the Prey, which marks an enemy and lets you teleport behind them, healing the players and slowing the enemies down. You can equip 3 powers, and when used together, you can do things like teleport to a group, temporal slice or slow them, and then teleport back and unload on those remaining enemies. The last thing they showed was the skill tree, which I personally am a fan of. There's 3 branches, but there are points which you can cross over between them, and that looks pretty sweet. That ability, in addition to some perks altering powers, it looks like this game will allow for unique builds within a class. Overall, I think the gameplay looked really great, and I'm excited to see more. They'll be doing these each month until release, so we'll be getting a lot more info throughout the year. Next, I wanted to talk about the backwards compatibility of next-generation consoles. Backwards compatibility is important to some people, as it's a lot easier to have one console that can run all the games you own, or at the very least, the games from a previous generation. Additionally, it gives consoles a larger library than just launch titles to start off with. Those who skipped a generation see much more value as they can play newer titles, as well as some of the older hits that are probably pretty cheap now. For the next generation, Microsoft has already stated that the Series X will be backwards compatible with thousands of games at launch, from the original Xbox on. These games will run natively and should perform even better than how they did when originally released. Also, the Series X will be able to automatically add HDR support to games, which is pretty nuts since they can add it to games that released before HDR was a thing. They also said that select games will have their resolution updated to 4K or have their frame rate doubled, from 30 to 60 or 60 to 120. Additionally, Microsoft had previously introduced their Smart Delivery feature, which gives you a Series X copy of a game if you bought it on Xbox One. Of course, this will only be for games that support it, but it is a very consumer-friendly move. Unfortunately, Sony, on the other hand, has not said much about their plans. Previous generations were not compatible with the PlayStation 4, which I understand is due to the architecture. It didn't seem to matter much for this generation, as the PlayStation 4 still won out, but going forward, it could be a tough sell. Sony did say that most PlayStation 4 games are expected to be playable on PlayStation 5, and they have now told developers that PlayStation 4 titles submitted for certification after July 13th must also be compatible with the PlayStation 5. It's a bit strange because they haven't really said exactly how this is going to work. Ideally, all your old games will work on the PlayStation 5, but we haven't gotten a definitive answer. And the fact that they have to specifically say that new games must be compatible makes it sound like there are some things that can't be done on Sony's end to get a game to run correctly. Also, they've mentioned no plans for upscaling or anything like that, so currently Microsoft seems to have the upper hand on this. I'm not going to say that backwards compatibility will make or break a console, but with how popular the PlayStation 4 is, it's going to be a bummer if people can't play some of the old games they own. It would also be great if some of those games got a boost in graphics or performance, but as of right now, we're just playing the waiting game to see what Sony has to say. The last topic for today is Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Remastered, something I'm personally pretty pumped for. Originally released in the West in 2004 for the GameCube, this was a great game that I loved playing as a kid. It plays a bit like a hack and slash and is a great co-op game. It required the GBA adapters for more than one player though, and while we still have some, it's a whole thing to bust out. The remaster is coming out worldwide on August 27th, and it will be released for the Switch, PlayStation 4, and mobile, supporting crossplay for these platforms. The basic plot of the game revolves around the shattering of the world-sustaining Great Crystal by a meteorite carrying an alien life form. These aliens generated poisonous miasma across the world. The players go through the world gathering myrrh, which empowers fragments of the Great Crystal in order to ward off the miasma. The game has a unique system where you need to have someone carry a vessel holding the myrrh, and players can stay inside the protective bubble it creates or take damage from the miasma if they're out of it. You can also overlay multiple players' magic in order to create more powerful spells when necessary. The game can be played solo, and the player will get a companion that basically does these features too, but it is more fun with friends. The game can be played solo, and the player gets a companion that basically does these features too, but it is of course more fun with friends. As always, the remaster will feature improved graphics and audio. Of course, the remaster will feature improved graphics and audio. The style is still the same, which maybe some don't like, but either way, I'd say the old resolution and audio files probably wouldn't hold up today. Also, voice acting has been added, which I think will be a great addition. There are also some new features, though most have not yet been announced, as they've said. I already mentioned the crossplay, and I think that's huge because you can get any friends with any of the platforms it's on to play with you, even if all they have is a phone. On a co-op focused game like this, that's pretty big. There's also new content being made for the remaster, so I'm pretty hyped for that. The main thing there is that it includes new dungeons, which I'd say is always welcome when re-releasing games. This is all new content made just for this. Additionally, Square Enix has mentioned a new Mimic feature, which is a small feature, but it will allow you to earn the ability to turn your character's appearance into that of the NPCs in the game. There wasn't a lot of customization, so this is welcome too. The only thing I'm a bit sad about is that they haven't really talked about single console couch co-op. Of course, I can play online with friends or sit on a couch with my Switch and play with somebody next to me, but it'd be cool to get someone to play with me without having them buy their own copy. Of course, this might be difficult as the original required the GBAs as a second screen, but we'll have to wait and see. Whether or not it's included, this is probably a day one buy for me just on nostalgia alone. If you like Final Fantasy or good couch co-op games in general, I'd check this one out. Debuff is hosted by me, Steve Skeels, edited and mixed by Mason Carlton. Follow us on Instagram at DebuffPod. That's DebuffPod. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.